You're on the air.
We're good? Live?
Live.
Going out to the world?
Live.
Good morning. I hope everyone's comfortable. Feel free, just be very relaxed. If you need to get up and stretch or have a walk or have some tea in your own bathroom, that's absolutely fine. Just relax and enjoy yourself. No need for any formalities. Just under the wire. That was close. So all this is about one very simple, very specific thing, which is, of course, this actuality. Which is exactly, precisely what it is, in exactly, precisely the way that it is. And all of our human problems and all the spiritual conundrums come from not recognizing exactly precisely what it is and exactly precisely the way it is, and misinterpreting it and thinking it's some other way, which we imagine in our minds, in our imagination. And then then we live as if what we imagined about it was the case. You know, we suppose more or less that, well, that's, you know, it kind of feels like it's this, and I think it is this, so I'll just behave as if it isn't. And this is the cause entirely of all human problems. In fact, it's the cause of humanness. In actuality, there's no human being. But that's getting ahead of myself. Since the problem is not recognizing precisely what this is and precisely the way this is what it is, the solution, of course, is to recognize what this is and the way it is what it is. Which it turns out is fortunately very easily doable, because what it is and the way it is what it is not in any way hidden or concealed or disguised or in any way blocked by itself. It's completely nakedly revealed and obvious what this is and the way it is what it is. I should come up with an acronym for that, so I don't. That's what we need, spirituality, more terminology. And it turns out this is easily doable because this is completely clearly exposed and displayed, number one. And number two, you are always completely and totally engaged with what it is and the way it is what it is, with absolute directness and absolute, let's just say full and hyper-intelligent engagement. You know, what we might usually call the field of your experience is nothing other than this. The field of your experience is the revelation of reality to itself, ultimately, because of course what's seeing you experience, what you think of as you, is actually reality. And of course what is being experienced, what you think of as perhaps the world or your life or whatever, is also of course reality. So reality is directly and fully revealed to reality in real time. And this is what we mistake for being our experience, our lives, our, you know, our difficult situation, our whatever. So that's pretty much the long and the short of it. We can go home now.
You know, I am curious about what you just said, that last sentence, that what we mistake as our difficulty?
Well, I'm just warming up actually. We can't really go on. I mean, you can. You can.
You know, just hold that thought,
The
because that's the condition. That's the human condition.
What was I talking about? So it's spontaneous, at least historically, as we all know, within experience, for the mind to generate interpretations of things, to generate initially theories and ultimately beliefs about what things are, the way they work, what's going on here, what we are, what life is, and all these sorts of things. And of course, we're all immersed in that as human normalcy, the normal human frame of reference, perspective, consensus, reality to various degrees, and so on. So these interpretive frameworks spontaneously, seemingly, are generated within awareness, and then they have effect, and they, if they're not, if circumstances don't arise for whatever guise to cause these interpretive frameworks to be questioned, we'll typically go through our lives thinking that things are more or less the way we think they are, and acting as if they're more or less the way we act, and so it goes. And then we're busy being us and fumbling through our lives and trying to succeed and trying not to fail and trying to find a little pleasure and trying to avoid pain and all the usual repertoire that we're all familiar with. The problem with this is that all these interpretations are intrinsically, inherently, necessarily inaccurate. For the simple reason that what this is intrinsically uninterpretable. What this is cannot be resolved as being one way or another way in any kind of linear logical way, which is what human rationality is made of. It's linear logic. Things are either this or they're that. Reality is not a thing that is either this or that. It's this. So reality is in this very strange condition of being both and none of the above all at once, which of course is kind of hard to wrap your head around when you're trying to figure out what something is and the way it works. But of course, we're experts at pretending we can do that. We're experts at pretending that we can get a handle on things. And so we do. We come up with having a supposed handle on things. But because of the nature of the linear logic we're stuck with, A, and because of the nature of the non-linearity of what we're trying to analyze, B, there's an inherent mismatch, there's an inherent disjunction. So no matter how clever and ingenious a model one tries to erect or interpretive framework of what this is, one will be wrong, inaccurate. And of course, if you're acting as if that was the case and believing that to be the case, you're basically a crazy person. You think you're living in a world that you don't live in. You think you're a being that you aren't. You think things work a way that they don't, so you may as well be some guy who thinks he's Napoleon or something. It's that much of a mismatch. Another aspect of these interpretive frameworks is they are always diminutive. Reality is infinite and open-ended and fractal, and well, what we can play with these aspects of it, none of which can actually be specified, of course. But anyway, and so when we create a model of thing, well, something is the way it is, something is this way, something is that way. These models we create are oversimplifications. They're caricatures. They're like stick figures. It's like when it's like a 3-year-old drawing a stick figure, you know, a vertical line and then a fork at the bottom and a fork at the top and a circle at the top, and says, "That's mommy." It's like, well, maybe, but mommy's a little more than that. You know, mommy's a little more than a couple of lines in a circle. And this is shockingly analogous to what we do in our minds when we think we say, well, I'm a human being, you know, and this is the world, and this is a planet, and this is matter, and this is energy, and this is that. All of these entities and conditions that we assert do exist, but in ways that are utterly and completely in every way beyond what we would think they are. So these interpretive frameworks that we inhabit are small and little and paltry and limited relative to the actual condition. Which is kind of nice, because then it turns out that exploring or discovering what's actually here feels like an opening, feels like a liberation, feels like coming out of a cold, dark cave into a wide open sunlight or something. Spiritual discovery has been euphemized as, liberation and enlightenment and all of these wonderful, all this glorious hyperbole. And in a way that's very appropriate, because it kind of feels like that. Because again, relative to these intrinsically relatively limited interpretive frameworks, reality is vastly more than that. So what to do? If that's the case, if this is some inconceivable, vast, transcendental actuality that one is living in, and one is interpreting it as being very much less than that, whatever one is interpreted as being, let's say, a universe that exists and it's existed for 15 billion years in space and time, and stuck with causality, and stuck with the four forces of physics, and stuck with cause and effect, and stuck with, historical time, and stuck with individual entities that are prey to the random influences and impacts of external conditions that they seem to be embedded in, and that inexorably force themselves upon one, and so on and so forth. I mean, in short, the normal materialist human worldview. If that's the case, that one thinks one is in that sort of a situation, and if it is also the case that one is in actual fact not in the slightest in a situation that is like that at all, what to do about it? Well, so how do you get from here to there? How do you deconstruct or somehow dismantle or disprove or bypass or transcend these limited erroneous interpretive frameworks to get to the actuality? Well, the good news is you're already kind of in the actuality. You never were not in the actuality. So it's what might be said to be a kind of a schizophrenic situation. By the way, I know there's some mental health professionals here today, and I use psychological jargon with wild abandon. I have no idea what I'm talking about, so please forgive my error. So it's kind of a schizophrenic situation where, on the one hand, you are completely living in reality as reality, and at the same time, you may be thinking of yourself as being whatever you think yourself to be, which will be a picture that more or less grossly deviates from the way you actually are. So you're kind of in two worlds, in two conditions simultaneously, subjectively. Even though you're only in one condition, objectively, you're only in reality, actually. So I mean, this is kind of working in our favor. All of this unreality doesn't actually exist. It's a fantastic framework that is generated in real time in the imagination. So you're already experiencing reality, naked as it is, with nothing concealed, nothing held back, nothing blocked. So that's kind of handy. So it's not like you need to build a bridge to reality just to get your foot in the door, just to get started somehow. don't just have your foot in the door. You're there lock, stock, and barrel. You've got you have all of reality as the actuality of your experience. So this is kind of convenient. So this makes the problem, perhaps much more manageable. So reality is available. In fact, nothing but reality is available. So my recommendation, the simplest, most direct, most efficient approach to getting out of these interpretive frameworks is noticing that you're not in them. So, which I invented a technical term, noticing. How much of a leap, I guess. Didn't take a lot of invention to indicate this approach, this strategy. So these interpretive frameworks are another advantage about the way that they work is they're very sketchy. They're sketchy. They're kind of like a movie set, where it looks pretty solid if you look at it from a certain angle, but you peek from around the side or something, and it's a shambles held together by tape and propped up and doesn't look like much. So these interpretive frameworks are full of holes. They're very sketchy. They're not really very consistent. Whereas experience itself, reality itself, is fully consistent. It's full-on Technicolor, high definition, quadraphonic, the whole deal. It's completely maximized in terms of its quality of expression. And so this is wonderful because this is the trick, or in my estimation, the easiest and most direct trick to access this and notice it, which is simply go to the richness of experience. The richness of experience is always and explicitly more than you think it is, and this is the case for everyone. This is the case for the most heavy-handedly, linearly relational person you can find. Experience is always this astounding richness and lusciousness. You see a sunset or something. You can say it's a sunset, and you can maybe sit and talk about it for 5 minutes or an hour or a week, very eruditely perhaps. But whatever you come up with is going to pale in the face of the actual presence of the sunset, the juiciness of that experience. So, in essence, noticing takes advantage of the vitality and juiciness of actuality, which makes it fun too. So it's a nice kind of a hedonism to let yourself slip into enjoying the fullness of experience, and then notice that, wow, how is it? What is it? How can this be so? How can a sunset have this amazing presence, this amazing detail, this amazing impact? How can light and color be so vibrant and so actual and so astoundingly dynamic? So on and so forth. You can specify all the various different aspects and bandwidths or contexts of experience individually if you want, but there's no need, because it doesn't matter where you look within your experience. You are always looking at actuality. So you can look at vision, you can look at the presence of vision, you can look at the presence of sensation, you can look at the presence of thought, you can look at the presence of some subtle vibe flavor that we don't have a category for verbally as humans, and so on. Any experience that is actually present, the actuality of experience itself, reveals an intrinsic lusciousness, fullness, multidimensionality, instantaneousness, spontaneity, so on and so forth, that it intrinsically is, and it's obvious and palpable that this is so. So the trick is just to do that from time to time, and ultimately one sensitizes oneself to this mode of experiencing, to the lusciousness actuality of what experience is, and one settles into its own nature, its own flavor, its own internal inherent logic, and one discovers that the logic of one's interpretive frameworks is paltry and niggardly and pathetic relative to the fullness and lusciousness and symphonic profundity of the actual actual fullness of experience. Now, of course, the rub is that typically the habit, the habit and the addiction to and the lifelong habit and addiction to and clinging to these interpretive frameworks that tends not to give up without a struggle. So these interpretive frameworks will have a staying power and forcefulness where they reassert themselves almost instantly. So if you're to some experience that where you're getting some wow factor, which is a good index of noticing is wow factor. Another technical term. So you go to some experience where there's some wow factor, and you get, boy, whatever, and all of a sudden there's a nonverbal actuality that's just astounding. And then almost instantly, the mind will kick in, and you start thinking about it, analyze it, and you'll think of other times you did that, or instantly, you're off and running, and all of a sudden you're back in your normalcy, and you're thinking about other times and future times, and you're just off and running back in your relational life, in your describable life. And the undescribability and lusciousness of experience, even though it doesn't ever go anywhere, of course, just seems to recede in prominence because of the way mind tends to jump to these narrative frameworks. Fine. So. No harm, no foul. That's what happens. So the strategy is this: you do noticing, let yourself be with the lusciousness of the direct contact of any experience at any point, at any time, whenever it's convenient. Be with what's there, and again, typically almost instantly. Especially for newbies or whatever, you'll tend to snap out of that and go into okay, fine, just let go. Don't try and cling to the freshness or the openness. Just let it go. Be very loose and easy with it. Be playful. It's best to approach it like a kind of a game you're playing with yourself. The more serious you are, the more goal-oriented you are with it, the more that you are working antagonistically to its inherent nature, and the more you're working inherently supporting the logic of interpretive frameworks, where you can cling to things, you can have things, you can have a thing or not have a thing. Whereas in actual open experience, that's an impossibility. There's no having and no not having. There's just presence. So again, you'll have some degree of presence of this amazing vitality of the lusciousness of experience. Anywhere in the experience, doesn't matter where, and you can be striving for it, trying to notice it. You can just be hanging out and spacing out and go, wow, see something pretty out the window or whatever, right? It doesn't matter. So this instance will happen, and then typically, you'll snap back into some degree of an interpretive framework. Just like that, very loose and easy. Okay, cool. Back in interpretive framework, so no problem. I'm very used to this. It feels like home. And then sooner or later, in a second or a minute or an hour or a day or a week or a month or a year, you'll do noticing again. You'll find yourself in some wow factor where you're really some experiencing. You'll be looking at some light or something and you go, woo! And the same thing will happen. Typically, there'll be this sort of back and forth yo-yo effect where there will be some degree of contact with the lusciousness, the explicit and obvious self-verifying lusciousness of experience, and then some degree of a snapback to this kind of interpretation. And so there's this kind of back and forth motion. But the fortunate thing is that actuality is much more powerful than these interpretive framings. Because these interpretive framings are imaginary. They don't have a leg to stand on. They're fabrications. They take a lot of work to maintain. They're shabby. They're partial. They're they claim their claim to completeness. It doesn't stand up to scrutiny. They're these pathetic partialities. Whereas actuality is not. Actuality is real. It is objective. It is actually present. It is actually and obviously the way that it is. So in this kind of a seesaw motion or yo-yo motion that's typical in this kind of exploration, where you move back and forth to moments of more explicit contact with the lusciousness of reality back into interpretive framework. Every time that there's a contact with the richness of experience, it builds on itself. It's like putting a penny in a piggy bank or something. And that is cumulative. But then when you go back to the interpretive framework, it's not cumulative because it doesn't have the power. It doesn't have the staying power. It doesn't have the authority that the self-verifying nature of objective actuality has. So in this kind of a typical yo-yo seesaw motion that goes back and forth, you'll notice something happening over time. Eventually, the noticing portions of the yo-yo will sort of become maybe stronger or longer or juicier or more vital or whatever. And you'll notice that the interpretive framework portions of the duality tend to shift into character too. And ultimately, basically, it's kind of, you can think of it also from another light, it's kind of like sensitivity training. In a way, you're training yourself to be sensitive to the lusciousness of your own direct experience. And this training also is cumulative, simply by direct exposure, not by doing anything or holding it in any particular way or trying to achieve anything, but simply by noticing the astounding richness and actuality of any direct experience. What you are gets it, because what you are is that, and it recognizes itself. All of this is profoundly and ultimately an exercise in self-recognition. What you are is this transcendental reality, intrinsically and inalienably. I mean, it's already a done deal. This is the fact. And what experience is, as experience, is also this reality. And so the seer recognizes the seen in a simple sense, or you could say the transcendental nature of what you actually are recognizes the transcendental nature of what experiential qualities actually are, and the resonance of that builds on itself as an acknowledgement, as a self-acknowledgement. Another way of on this same line, another way of parsing the whole spiritual problem is that reality, which is what is experiencing this here, and of course what is being experienced as well, is not recognizing itself. It's got a bollocksed up interpretation of what is going on. But in the direct immediacy of actual naked experience, the recognition is implicit, it's facilitated, because the intrinsic flavor of the energy that presents as experiential characteristics resonates with the intrinsic flavor of let's call it the energy that experiences it. And this irrational but actual resonance is what the substance of self-recognition is. And this resonance builds on itself through acclimatization. So again, basically, the process of what I call this yoga is simply to let yourself go into any degree of wow factor in any portion of experience that is easy for you. You do it wherever it's easy, and from time to time, whenever that's easy. And if you do this with some, with some periodic regularity, you will notice, perhaps surprisingly soon, things will start to happen. Things will shift. There's a spontaneous reorientation that occurs as a result of this seemingly simple, trivial engagement. It tends to happen under the table, so to speak. It happens intrinsically, so you may not even be aware that you're doing anything or that anything's happening. But you will almost certainly notice just a sort of a shift, a general shift in the flavor, or the sort of the way in which you are holding yourself within your own energy field, or whatever that means. Of course, we don't have language to describe all this precisely because it's not of the nature of quality that is precisely describable with our linear language. So we're kind of hampered there trying to talk about this stuff. So that's basically the long and the short of it. That's an overview of what the situation is here and what to do about it. Leave anything out? I think that's the bare bones, and I would be very glad to invite discussion with you about any fine points or any aspects of this that seem of interest to you or you're curious about.
Would you say that this cumulative effect always takes place before it becomes a permanent fixture in your being?
In my experience, there's absolutely no way of predicting the sort of the arc of the thing. Everyone's very different. I know one person I met them and I started working with them, and in about 15 minutes they were sitting there going, oh my God, I can't believe it. They saw the whole thing right off the bat, but that's very unusual. Most people, it's typically much more gradual. But I would say it's pretty obvious and palpable. I mean, usually if people get far enough to even sit and consider this stuff, they're already ripe for it. And I'm sure you will get some mileage. I mean, the thing is that this is not theoretical. This is not theory. This is not philosophy. It's very much pragmatic and practical, and it's self-verifying. Just try it for a while, and you'll see for yourself if there's anything there or what's there. And in my experience, it will not disappoint. It will reveal at least some degree of verification, intrinsic verification of that it's the real thing, because it is the real thing.
So I've played with that, and what I've bumped up against is the mind just even interfering with seeing that bush or that flower.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I'm not in a thought. The thought isn't in the intelligence, but it's almost like there is a veil or a covering or something that makes it hard for me to.
Right. Okay. But even if there is a veil, this is here. That's there. Okay. And the there-ness is not a veil. That you're seeing anything is not a veil. This is not a concept. Whether or not it's a bush, whether or not it's naked, that can be conceptual. But that it's here. I mean, I'm looking at you. I'm seeing you. That is not whatever I may think about that or interpret that. There's something here that's actual. That is not a concept. That is not a veil. There can be all the veils in the world and concepts in the world, but the actuality is here.
So maybe there's a should that I should be feeling more.
There's no shoulds. There's no shoulds. You have to dance. You dance with it and find your way through it. I mean, in a way, we're our own worst enemies in all of this because, of course, in a certain sense, you're tackling yourself. You're tackling your own ego identification. Again, pseudo psychological terms there. But nonetheless, it's kind of like that. But again, the actuality is there, and the actuality is not ego. The actuality is not the presence of the actuality of it. Is not a concept, is not a veil, is not an interpretation. No matter how much veils and interpretations there are, they're in a context which is not that, which is real, which is actual. And that's the powerful fact. And again, one has to discover one's own tricks or one's own access points. It's supremely personal. We all have a very unique nature and psychology, and our energies work in very different ways. And so you have to sort of play around with your own self, with your own nature, and find tricks of tricking yourself.
Yeah, because what just occurred to me is here's another word, but it's a habituation.
Sure.
So I see this, and this will just yeah.
But again, the habituation is occurring in the context that is not habituation. That bush that you're seeing, you've never seen before. How can there be habituation? So there's something that is not a habituation. However much habituation is, that is a surprise. You never saw that before in your life. And in the instant, you've never seen it exactly where you're seeing it right now before in your life, and you'll never see it that way again. So there's always explicit, objective, actual uniqueness. That is, it can't be a habituation. How can it be a habit if it's new, if it's fresh, if it's spontaneous, if it's unexpected?
It just seems like this mind is saying, oh yeah, I know what that is.
Cool.
I mean, it's so annoying.
Don't worry about the mind, screw the mind.
Okay.
You're not trying to stop the mind. You're not at war with the mind. The mind is good. The mind is it too.
The mind
Is spontaneous energy. The mind isn't mind. The mind thinks it's mind, but mind isn't mind. Rationality thinks it's rational, but rationality is not rational. But you don't need to worry about that. So you go to somewhere where it's easy. Where it's easy to see. Look at a cloud. Look at light. Listen to
yeah,
a bird. Startlement is a good thing to play with. In Dzogchen, they use that as a technique about startlement. Sudden loud noises. In China, they use firecrackers. So, anything that's an unexpected actuality that is surprising, it's clearly and palpably not a concept. It's spontaneous, it's real, it has juice, it has power, and you just explore that. What is this juice? What is this actuality? What is this power? What is this startlement? What is this surprise?
I think the cloud is a great idea.
Anything.
That's really,
So you find your own tricks, and everyone will have spots where it's really hard, and it doesn't matter. You just ignore that. Find some place where it's easy, because this is not another really, really delightfully wonderful positive aspect of this technique. Is it's not serial. It's not like you need to do noticing somewhere and then do noticing somewhere else and do noticing somewhere else until you can check all the different areas of experience off your list. Good noticing anywhere applies everywhere. When you see what anything is, you're actually seeing what everything is. Because the nature of experience, the nature of actuality, is that it's one thing that happens in one way. So anywhere you're seeing it, you're seeing it applied across the board. So it's like, so noticing actuality in any instance is like poking a hole in a boat. Right? You don't need to go around and poke a hole every part of the boat. You don't need to eliminate the hull by replacing it with holes. Single holes don't do the job. Then you just be patient. And just notice the way, and any experience that you can notice this in is beyond interpretation. You can't pin it down. You look at a sunset and you go, wow, how can this be like this? Why does this feel like this? It's so palpably more there than you can specify or define. Let me write a thesis on exactly why sunsets are beautiful, and these categories, and I think I've exhausted that comprehensively. Bullshit. That's not going to happen. Direct experience is so palpably, transcendentally luscious and rich and unanalyzably so. No matter how elaborate and ingenious an analysis you can come up with something, there's so much that's left out. And you can be the greatest genius that ever lived or will live, and your efforts of description are going to be paltry. And this is always the case. This is always the case. And actuality, experiential actuality is like that intrinsically for everyone. So it's like, you don't need to muster genius to assimilate it. It is genius. And what it is that is experiencing your experience is genius. So it has full potency, full ability to recognize, to be with itself as non-linearly as it is, because what's experiencing it and what's recognizing it is equally non-linear. What's seeing your experience right now is completely transcendental. And what's being seen is completely transcendental. And that's the whole key of this yoga. So the fact that there may be veils in the middle and you're thinking, oh no, but I'm just me, I'm little old me sitting over here, I'm just Peter Brown in this body and this world's out there and I don't know what it is and I don't, blah, blah, blah. All that's fine, but that's existing in the context of what's actually seeing my experience. I can't possibly describe it. I can't possibly indicate it. I can't steer it. It's a transcendental actuality it is me in the most profound sense, but it's nothing I can wrap my head around or even find. Right? And likewise, what's being experienced ultimately is precisely the same. Look at the presence of color, look at the presence of light, look at the presence of all of this inconceivable density of subtle information. And so you let the beyond you that is you recognize the beyond you that is being experienced, and that's sufficient. And you, even though the veils of you and your interpreter are sort of stuck in the middle, they're irrelevant. You don't even need to bother with them to take care of themselves. They recede into irrelevance on their own inherent nature. In the face of the undeniable, overwhelming evidence of this astoundingness that is here. That's poetic.
Is the actuality happening? Other philosophies say when the observer and the observed become one.
They're already one.
Yeah.
It's theoretical that there's first of all, the observer and the observed is a theory. You can't find an observer separate from anything observed, and you can't find an observed separate from any observer. So that even that there is an observer and an observed is just theory, it's just philosophy, it's logic. So it's unnecessary. This actuality that is here is intrinsically unity. It doesn't have parts. You can't, find this over here and that. There's no observed over here and no observer over here with space between them. Try and find the observer. Can you find an observer? There's observation, so there must be an observer. It's logical. Yeah, it's logical, but it's totally, that argument, that structure is totally derived from a logical argument. It's not derived empirically. You can't find an observer. You can't find an observed. There's just this observing.
If you're not experiencing it, what pulls us out of that actuality?
Well, what pulls out of the actuality is our habit of thinking of analyzing and interpreting it as being a certain.
But who's having that habit?
Well, it just happens. It's just there. There's no need to analyze it or try and sort it out, because that can't be done anyway. Since how anything happens and the way in which anything happens and why anything happens is completely unanalyzable, there's no point wasting our efforts on it. I mean, how does psychological functionalities emerge? Arrive? Well, the outcomes of the inherent genetic structure of the nature of the central nervous system which arises, blah, 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 blah. Bullshit. It's a mystery. There's all this intense and astounding, apparent aspects of the way things seem to be. But when you go looking for any of them, they they're mysterious. No one can say what anything is. We can have all sorts of very ingenious hypotheses, but we can't know what anything actually is.
So, following that, so what is that feeling of separateness?
It's fantasy. You know, it's viable. It can maintain itself because of the astounding subtlety of the qualities that this presents in. You know, this presents itself with such an inconceivable infinity of apparent differentiation without ever actually becoming different in itself. You know, all the different colors, all the different textures, all the different luminosities, all the different frequencies of sound, all the different sensations of touches. This amazing, this universe of infinities of experiential characteristics can seem to form a basis for an interpretation that, well, if there's all this difference, there must be differences. But then when you look at this difference and try and find actual discrete differences, you can't find anything discrete anywhere. So it's, you know, in Advaita they call it Maya. You know, there's this amazing principle where there's all of this incredible apparent differentiation, but you can't ever actually find any differences. You can't find any of this, and you can't find any of that. You can't pin anything down.
But right now, there's that separateness you talked about between objects, but then I'm talking about the feeling that I'm sitting here and you're there.
Right, but all of that's imaginary. It's generated imagination. There's only here. And here is the field of your experience for you. For me, here is the field of my experience. I don't even know if you exist. I know you exist as an apparent, you know, aspect of objectivity within my experience. And if you exist, I may exist as an apparent apparition of objectivity within your experience. But that's your problem. So here is the bubble of my experience. So where am I experiencing my hand? Here, in my experience. Where am I experiencing you? Here, in my experience. Where am I experiencing that building over there? Here, in my experience. So here is just means me. Here just means this. So there's no there. There is just a euphemism for here. Because here has the very slippery and nonlinear and irrational property of seeming to be infinitely differentiated from itself without ever being anywhere else. So there's all these heres, there's infinite heres that could be specified, but they're all here, which is illogical, but this is not logical. Reality does not conform to logic. That's part of the reason why, you know, we tie ourselves into such knots when we expect it to.
It seems like it might be a question of clarity. You know, like you have this, this, which is always here,
Right.
and totally clear,
Yeah.
and the thing that experiences it is also totally infinity.
Yes.
There's nothing
Right,
to cloud.
exactly, yes.
But yet we take these forays out
Yeah,
into
we pretend to, yes.
hinterlands, and then, we pretend to.
Yeah.
And things become less clear.
Right, they can seem to.
But we always come back
Yeah,
to those moments we go in and out, like you say.
yeah, because actual clarity is infinite and is non-linear. And when we try to impose finiteness and linearity of the logical construct upon that, it gets very murky all of a sudden. Because clarity demands infinity, actuality demands infinity, because it is that way. It's like we were talking about, you know, location. You know, in actuality, there can be multiple heres and there's only one here. That makes no sense. How can you do that? Well, infinity is easy. You know, 2 times infinity equals infinity. 1,000 times infinity equals infinity. So you can multiply infinity times 1,000 and you end up with the answer is exactly the same you started with, which makes perfect sense experientially. You know, you look at how many locations are here, as many as I care to specify. how many locations are actually here? Just one. Just this that is here. And all these apparently different locations are just versions of this that's here. But think of a dream. A dream's a good example. You know, waking space is difficult to talk about because as inhabitants of that mode of logic, we're used to thinking of it as actually being objective. But think of a dream. A dream can look just like this. A dream can look like you're in an environment and there's all sorts of complexity and there's other beings and there's things way over there and things distant and things close. And you wake up and you look back and you think, how much space was there really there? There was no space. All of this apparent space was generated solely experientially. It was a virtual apparition bootstrapped out of absolutely nothing, right? There's no space there. It can be very bright. You can be in bright sunlight. You can be in, burning to death in the desert in a dream. And where's the sun? Where's the heat? Where's the light? There's nothing there. Where do all these qualities come from? They're just apparent. They're apparently differentiated. But when you're dreaming, there's all these different beings in different situations, in different scenarios, in different environments. But how many things are there when you're dreaming? One, the dreaming. And all of this apparition and diversity is just an offshoot of the way that happens to present itself. Exactly the same thing is here. There's only one thing happening here, and it happens in one way. If we could go to sleep and discuss from the sleep state what the waking state looks like, it would look just like a dream. As soon as you go to sleep, where does the waking world go? Poof, it vanishes. When you're asleep, you don't even know it was ever here. It's just gone. Poof, you're not you. Space isn't space. Time isn't time. History isn't history. That just appears in the waking dream. And then you start dreaming, and all of a sudden there's a new space and a new time and a new history, right? And that's here, then. And then the dream stops, and where's it gone? Poof, it's just gone. So it's all very nonlinear. So if if what's happening here is the same thing as what's happening when you're in deep sleep, and if it's the same thing as what's happening when you're dreaming, but they look so different, how does that work? Well, that's just the way it works. It can look like anything. It can look like all of this incredible detail of precise differentiation, all this amazing, elaborate display of all these different colors and lights and shapes and sounds and sensations and all that, and not actually be anything at all, And it isn't, in the next instant, it isn't anything at all. This entire morning is gone now. All we have is this instant right here. Where's it gone? It's nothing. It may as well never have happened. It's just nothing. And the whole rest of the day, where is it right now? It's nothing. It's nowhere. And yet, at the appropriate time, it will seem to be everything for an absolute timeless instant, and then it'll be nothing again. Where's the dream before you're dreaming? It's nothing. That's a meaningless question. Where's the dream after you're dreaming? It's nothing. It's a meaningless question. While you're dreaming, it's nothing too. It just looks like something. It hasn't actually become anything. A dream isn't any more when you're dreaming it than before you dream it. It's the same thing. It's nothing at all. It's just an apparition.
Like our life?
Like everything. But anyway, you don't really make sense of this stuff or even think that because it's absurd. But you can see it. You can experience for yourself the actuality of the way it is. And it's not literally like the way I've been describing it, because any description is going to be inherently inaccurate. But what it is totally available and accessible. And in fact, you already know it because you live it. You're in it all the time. We're very familiar with the state of actuality, but we suppress it through the bizarre creation of an apparent unconscious mind, a conscious mind, whatever that is, however that works. The unconscious mind totally knows nonlinearity, totally knows everything is interchangeable and time and space are arbitrary. It totally knows that, and that's you too, just because it's not accessible to your thinking mind. Then the conscious mind comes along and says, "No, wait a minute, that's not like that. We have to sort this out. Let's figure out what's going. Let's describe it. Let's have a good narrative." It's like a narrative of a dream. Well, what happened in a dream? Well, last night I was dreaming and I found myself in Times Square and someone came up to me and like, really? Did that really happen? Well, it's the narrative. Have you ever noticed that? I notice that sometimes about my dreams. I'll be dreaming and I'll kind of have I might be in a condition where I have enough sentience to sort of have a sense of looking at, oh, wow, what's happening here? And I'll notice that I might be able to see sort of three completely disparate things that are sort of kind of happening simultaneously. And if I collapse it down to a narrative, it sort of becomes that's what's happening. But actually, as a dream, in the actuality of the dream, it's more nebulous than that. It's sort of several things at once are kind of almost happening, and it's sort of, I mean, it's a very strange, non-linear, indescribable actuality. And I think we experience things all like that all the time. Our waking experience is like that too. When we're used to approaching things from an interpretive framework, we're thinking we know what's going on. But if you look very, very closely, very precisely at real-time experience, you'll notice that there's all these different dimensions. There's daydreams and fantasy and memory, and all of a sudden you drift and you notice some sensation of something that reminds you of something from your childhood. There's all these instantaneous sort of dancing around and flashing around, little virtual snippets of flavor that don't form a coherent narrative at all. I mean, there's just this weird shotgun scatter of bizarre, unrelated qualities. I mean, they're related in the sense that they're there, but there's no linearity or coherence to them. And we're all experiencing, something analogous to that all the time. But we don't notice it because we're very good, frequently in the waking state, doing this sort of linear narrative of, well, now I'm here and this is a spiritual talk and this, that, and the other, and I'm ignoring the sensation in my sock on my left heel because it's not part of the narrative. It's just noise in the system. But the nature of experience is it's 99.9% noise and 0.1% actual story. And we all are in that condition all the time. And so noticing is just letting yourself notice the noise, letting yourself settle into the non-linearity of what you're actually experiencing in the moment. Just all the sea of flavors and nuance and memory and distractions and daydreams and sensation and everything that just sort of is continually drifting and wafting through very spontaneously and non-linearly and incoherently. I mean, it's always happening. It's not doing anything new. It's just sort of letting your attention relax so you sort of dolly out. You get a little less micromanaged about having to have a sharp focus of this or that. We're going for about an hour. Shall we take a 5-minute break, stretch?
Yeah.
If anyone has not visited the donation basket, that'd be appreciated.
Hey, how you doing?
Good on you.
Nice to meet you, Jacob. There are a lot of Peters.
Okay, with all the non-Peters raise their hand.
So I'm just still kind of time to see. I have difficulty.
Okay.
No, I haven't heard of that one yet.
Are you finding your new artist space
Here's the chef. Okay.
So they come in. But I do love this space. I love it. It's so the trees. It's really nice. I'm the court. Is it? No, I did a little run. It's just like, so I was able to surprise her. No, I just rolled around. I read it. Luckily, I saw someone I recognized in the park. She read the directions.
But nice dash.
Yeah. There may be people still, they're wandering around, or just walking around. It's not here, it's there. Yeah. No, this is good. It's pretty well. Well, I think I have to stay here. No, I'm just like a so that's why
and then they just turn it back on. Just turn it on. Yeah. Just get a little chill.
and then there's of course the
You never sit by the trees, then you might.
Richard, no, Richard, that's the area.
Yeah, I only had it once and I picked up on that. I thought, yeah, really? Yeah, that was the first time.
That was
It's mine though, that means it's not else. What do you tell them? Yeah, that's true.
right. I didn't hear
So you know,
All kinds of good stuff, but I
Every time.
there's a whole
Yeah, we just want to see how this manifests. It'd be interesting to see how this manifests our next meeting. Some of us have been here.
Hey, how are you? Why? Melody.
Wow.
That's terrible. Yeah, I'm really so
Perhaps we can reconvene before long?
this is Scott.
I had that effect. They just can't forget. Yeah, magnetic.
I know, and then I got lost, and then I thought you said no, Mala, and I was like, wait a minute, did I just wrong? And then I forgot, they all, I hear that, like, if you really share, I remember.
We don't repeat what's a decent. No, it's just nice to do when you're making
That's our president.
Oh, yeah, no, exactly.
And then, you know, I'm like, I don't know, like, what am I gonna do?
I'll take it next time. Oh, thank you for being here.
I'll just do this.
Then I have a perfect.
Sure.
picture.
I don't mind, yeah, no problem.
Ley lines.
I know that's everything, but I like.
So we're back? Can we go anywhere? Yeah, I forgot to mention specifically at the beginning of the talk, we have limited bathroom facilities, so if you feel the urge at any point, it's probably best to hop up and do it whenever the thought arises, just to avoid long lines at break time. Anyway.
Peter, one thing you were saying before was the sense that sometimes things happen underground.
Right.
With all of this, and one thing that I have been experiencing for a little while is that I do feel like something comes and gets me and orients me in a particular way.
Sure.
And it's very subtle. It isn't like it isn't a mind thing, but all of a sudden I will just kind of go do something. It's spontaneous and I need to do. It's a little hard to describe because it feels like it's on another level. It's not a big deal, but I do feel that presence. And I can be gone for a long time with my mind and other things, but something comes to get me and just orients me a little differently. Is that what you're speaking about? If you don't know?
No, that's in the mix maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one aspect of this is that the way all of our normal functioning is actually completely under the table. We don't really know why we do what we do. We don't really know even what we're doing. We have all of these urges and motivations, and we do this and that and the other, and we may have a logic or a narrative to explain it all, but it's all fabricated. Basically, all of this, this motivation, this urge, and all that just shows up, mysteriously, and it carries us hither and yon.
It's kind of everything is spontaneously.
Yeah.
I mean, there isn't any.
Yeah. I mean, that's what noticing is about. I mean, realization is not, a change of condition. It's simply realizing what has always been the case. So in all of this, there's little actual change or reorientation that happens. It's a seeming reorientation as one looks at it in a different light, let's say.
Peter, this is kind of just an odd thought I've had. When you talk about the dreaming, when I have a dream, I'm dreaming, even though it's wacky, in the dream I can drive a car and do things that I could do, but in my dream I'm not doing things that I normally can't do in my dreams as well, and even though wacky things happen. So in that dreaming, it sort of fits with who I am and what my skills and limitations are, to an extent. But then in my dreaming, when I'm awake, sort of, my dreaming now is there's someone like you speaking brilliantly about things that I couldn't speak about, or I could listen to, what's his name, The Universal Secrets of the Cosmos on my television set, and all of that is. Do you hear any kind of a question in there?
I just heard a question.
So I'm just wondering how it works. How does that work?
Well, it's a mystery.
Because you were talking,
you can't say how
everything's out here. This is my here.
Yeah.
So my here, when I'm listening to whoever it is that talks about the cosmos, or I'm listening to you, it's my here. You may not exist, or he may not exist.
Sure, yeah.
So how come this limits itself, which is not the whole shebang, can bring into my dreaming because I'm still dreaming, things that are so much bigger than I am.
Well, the sense that you're bringing it in is maybe a little heavy-handed. I mean, all you can say is it seems to look the way it seems to look, and there's no reason, there's no rhyme or reason to it. Why does your experience look the way it happens to look when it happens to look that way? This is one of the amazing mysteries. Why does this look the way it does? Why are you? Why does what seems to happen in your experience seem to happen in your experience? Why aren't you me? Why does what seems to happen in my experience seem to happen in my experience?
And so it's sort of useless and somewhat ridiculous to sort of try and we do that, don't we, as humans? We try, as you said, to go to this linear logical thinking and because we want sort of a paradigm or something, but it's better to just be, I don't know.
The ultimate principle that's discoverable about reality is that it's entirely unresolvable, by which I mean it's not resolvable as being one way or another way. In other words, no question is actually answerable, period, in the strongest possible terms. No question is actually answerable. So you feel free to ask any question you want. Why is it like that? But no answer is going to come not because there isn't an answer, because the answer isn't an answer. An answer is this. The answer to any question is always this, which may not seem like much of an answer, but actually it's a supremely powerful answer.
Makes it a lot simpler.
Yeah, well, it's extremely simple. All of this complexity is one thing that happens in one way. Why have it to be any simpler than that? But you can't ever say what that one thing is or say what that one way is because it's unresolvable. But you don't need. But that's as humans we think that we have to have answers. We have to know. But the answer that there is no answer is actually a very powerful and profound answer. It's not a simple pat on the back and saying, well, sorry old chap, we're just not going to get that one. It's more that it is a mystery is a positivity, not a negativity. This is an actual positivity that is a mystery, rather than it's a mystery, so there's no answer. That's not a negation. It is a mystery. It is a miracle.
Do you think sometimes trying to ponder the unanswerable and seeking what there isn't an answer for actually can bring you closer to what's unanswerable?
Absolutely. It's a good mode of noticing if you let yourself get beyond logic. If you let yourself jump from that into noticing. So ponder, like a question, what is this, is a great question. If you get beyond something, what is this? Well, it could be this, it could be that. You go to, what is this? Here it is, what is it? And that's good noticing. And you get the answer. The answer is no answer, but it's the answer. It's not nothing. This is not nothing. This is not nothing. However weird and non-linear and infinite it is, it's not nothing. And it's profound. That's profound. This is the answer to everything. This is the unified field theory that physicists will always be looking for. They're never going to find it because they want to specify it. But they'll be able to build lots of nice weapons on them. Yeah.
So if, maybe those donuts are here too, so I'll be ready for that.
Oh, I'll come up with some bullshit.
Just for me. So if a group of people were, had an intention to get together and attempt to communicate in some way with each other about this, I don't know, what might it look like? I know what it might not look like, which is a lot of theories and personal opinions and concepts. but I wonder how might we engage?
Even that would be that, what you described is a fabrication. And then your question is a fabrication, and any answer you came up with would be a fabrication. And what would actually be happening would be so far beyond anything that's included in your description as to render your description essentially irrelevant. I mean, you know, in other words, what's happening here? Oh, it's a spiritual medium. We're meeting to talk. Really? What's happening here? There's no answer to that question. You know, these paltry answers are rational, you know, logical story of what is going on. It's just like there's no answer to what's happening, what anything ever is, and what goes on there, and what it's doing, and why it's doing it, and the whole thing. I mean, why are you here? I don't know why. Oh, I'm here because I'm, you know, really motivated to share the Dharma. It's just, you know, weirdness morphing into weirdness, morphing into weirdness. You know, non-linearly happening in multiple dimensions, you know, chaotically and self-contradictorily with an inconceivable profundity. But we're having a talk. You know, we come up with these paltry descriptions and spin doctors and we pretend that that's what's actually happening.
I don't hear you referring to the divine.
I've been actually referring to nothing but. I will do, but just not in those terms. Because there's no need to be explicit about it being divine or not, because again, that doesn't actually mean anything. It's not, what does divine mean? You know, oh, divine means, you know, if there is divine, this is certainly it. You know, it is completely and utterly and intrinsically transcendental. It even transcends itself, which sounds pretty much to me like a definition of the divine.
It does.
So I would say, yeah, this is the divine. I mean, this, you know, there's really only one thing we're talking about here. If it is a thing and if it is one, which of course is you know, begging the question. But sure, yeah, this is divine. All we're talking, this is a religious devotional meeting, actually.
This guy.
I mean, you know, all branches of human endeavor have never been about anything else. You know, when physicists get together and doing their experiments, they're looking at this. You know, when you know, devotional holy rollers get together and dance and sing, they're looking at this. You know, when political, you know, plotters get together and plot their revolutions, they're talking about this. Everything is always about the same thing. So it's always about, you know, just there's so many different ways of parsing it and ways of approaching it, sort of vectors where you can, let's approach it as if it's sociology, let's approach it as if it's physics, let's approach it as if it's psychology, let's approach it as if it's transcendental divinity, let's approach it, you know. But it becomes moot because what it is itself doesn't meet you halfway. It stays being what it is, and yet, but its nature of what it is so infinite and protean that it can readily accommodate virtually any way of approaching it. It can seem to be, you know, what's that? There's a figure in mythology that's like that. Anyway, any way you expect it to look, it will seem to be that. So if you expect it to be physics, it will seem to be physics. All of this is a dense of quarks. If we just really understood the quantum phenomena well enough, we know everything there is to know about it. You know, but all of it, you know, I mean, there's all these different sort of meta frameworks to approach it in terms of, and it will be very accommodatively seem to be that. And you know, this is self-evidently true because all human, you know, categories of endeavor have never been about anything or in any other context in actuality, of course. So naturally, that's the case more or less. mean, calling it spirituality is is an absurdity. It's a handy approach because it's so obviously absurd and so open-ended. It doesn't mean anything. So if we call this a political meeting, then it would have more connotation and sort of the open-endedness can be a little advantage in terms of giving us latitude to break our own rules.
Now, if the interpretive frameworks were like really strong in the way they play out,
Sure.
do you still stay with what is, as in, like whenever that plays, you look at, and then whatever is, you just stay with until the noise of that settles down, or?
No. It's a mistake, practically speaking, pragmatically. It's a mistake to use this as an antidote to interpretive framework. They're not contraries. They're not opposites of each other, where the one replaces the other. Trying to remedy or correct any situation actually strengthens it. So to use what I call noticing as a remedy for psychological identification or interpretive frameworks or what have you, actually strengthens the interpretive frameworks because you're actually orienting to them. On the contrary, noticing just completely ignores them, so you're actually taking power away from them. One interesting aspect of the way this seems to work is that when you give something attention, you redify it, you make it stronger, you make it more real. And so the way to make interpretive frameworks less real is to take your attention elsewhere, rather than take your attention elsewhere as a way of addressing interpretive frameworks, because that's actually subliminally directing your attention to the interpretive frameworks, so you're actually feeding them. See what I mean? So this is more a kind of an alternative. It's like, well, there's the interpretive frameworks, and then I'm going to go over here and do this for a while. And then there's the interpretive framework, but they have nothing to do with each other. They may or may not coexist, but you sort of split. It's multitasking. It's like on your computer, you may have your accounting program and you have your email, but they don't have anything to do with each other. So you may do your accounting and then you go and check some email and then you go back to the accounting, but it's not like the email is to solve the accounting and vice versa. Bad example.
So you said to put your attention else. Yeah, I got a little confused with you said you don't want to. I'm screwing this up. Can you?
Is there something to screw up?
It appears to be. So there's the interpretive framework, and then there's
No. What I was, the gist of that exchange, I would argue, is that doing anything as a remedy to something else is actually feeding the thing you're trying to remedy.
So could you make an example that probably would help me?
Sure. Suppose you're trying to stop thinking. So you're trying to stop thinking, so you meditate. I'm meditating because I'm going to stop my thinking. I'm meditating because I'm going to stop my thinking. But because what you're doing, when you're doing the meditating, it's about the thinking, you're actually orienting to the thinking, which makes it stronger. Okay. Because basically orienting to something, giving it attention, let's call it, makes it more actual or relevant in terms of what you consider important.
So the alternative
is you give it completely unimportance by simply going elsewhere, not with respect to it, but you just go elsewhere.
That's what I missed.
Right. In other words, it's a positivity. So if I'm looking at you, I can look away because I want to look away from you, which is still about you, or I can look away because I'm really interested in what's over there, which is not about you.
Got it.
And that more thoroughly erases you from my universe than if I'm looking away from you because I know I want to look away from you. The from you actually brings you from the center.
Exactly. Yes.
And so that's the subtle mechanism of remedies. When you try and remedy some condition, you're actually throwing gasoline on that fire. Whereas just bypassing it, letting your attention go somewhere else, you're by withdrawal of attention, without regard to it in itself at all, it becomes more personal, it becomes less
It's
relevant.
not trying to avoid anything.
Yeah.
Just redirect.
It's not avoiding, you're not going away from a negativity, you're going towards a positivity. You know, actuality, noticing is going to a positivity. It's not going away from the negativity. You're not going away from your interpretive frameworks. You're going towards actuality. And the interpretive frameworks are totally fine. You don't care about them one way or the other. They can take care of themselves. I'm going over here for a while. Which paradoxically turns out to be a good way as an antidote to the interpretive framework. But don't tell them that. They got a swelled head and a sense of self-importance. I mean, all this stuff is very slippery because this framework is so multidimensional. There's all of these, different and maybe essentially contradictory modes that coexist. And essentially, even though they coexist, they don't have much to do with each other. So all of our experience is always in this direct, open, irrational infinity of lusciousness. And at the same time, we may be in various psychological modes of self-identification and psychological mechanisms, or maybe in all sorts of conceptual interpretive frameworks, and all these various sort of little bubbles of orientation that coexist and aren't particularly coherent with each other or with themselves, for that matter. And all of this mishmash just is sort of floating around ambiently and coming and going to the forefront within our experience. And it's not a matter of straightening it out, it's just a matter of noticing that it's so. And quit being a Nazi about insisting on one bubble of relational is actually dominant, or matters more than the other. And then one discovers that none of these things are actually problems. They're all just weird modes of this being with itself. This can be with itself as a psychologically identified individual. This can be with itself as an conceptual interpretive framework. This can be with itself as a wash of infinite, unanalyzable lusciousness of, experiential energy presence or whatever. All of those things can be occurring. And
could you say a little bit more about that when you said this can be with itself as a psychologically identified human being?
we're all very familiar with that.
Yeah.
The mode where I am Peter Brown and I do have my life and I do have my history and I do have my aspirations and my regrets and my psychological flaws and my this and my that. That's a totally viable way of looking at things that can present itself, very dominantly. That's one mode that it seems to be. And obviously, it is reality that is presenting that, or else how could it be present? Nothing can exist unless it's a mode of reality. Unreality can't actually exist. What would it be made of? So that partial perspective is one way that reality can present itself.
Yet, what I'm hearing, it's a partial perspective.
Of course, all perspectives are partial. Because this itself is beyond perspective.
So it's like it's one thing in something else, it seems.
It's many things in it's like those little nested Russian dolls, or like layers of an onion or something, with no center. Turtles all the way down.
So our identification, well, of course. Our identification, here's me in my identification, is like,
in this.
Yeah.
Here it is.
Wow.
If it is, here it is, and here is here. Right? And that's the same argument applies to anything whatsoever. If an interpretive, it's weird. Things are the way they are. An interpretive framework, if it's present, it's here in this. and this is always transcends it, is always the context and the substance of whatever mode is dominantly presenting itself. It's very multidimensional. It's also very incoherent. All these different modes and perspectives don't necessarily have much to do with each other, if anything. So there's this, we live in this, it's like living in simultaneously in dozens or hundreds or countless different worlds at the same time, being a dozen or hundreds or countless different people with different orientations, different entities with different orientations at the same time, because coexisting non-linearly in an insanity of actuality. And it kind of looks like that if you look closely. Or maybe if you don't look too closely. And the point isn't about fixing that or changing it. The point is just noticing it, seeing what it is. Because what it is turns out to be absolutely non-problematic. These partial perspectives can imply all sorts of problems in themselves, but since they are partial, when you see that they are partial, their problems turn out to be non-entities, turn out to be irrelevant. The fact that my personality is partial and neurotic and scarred and warped and all that is maybe a fact, but it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. Nothing is actually damaged or harmed by that. It's just a weird condition. It's like a tree that happens to grow in a weird shape because it grew up against a boulder. That may be a fact, but it's not a problem.
That is amazing because, show me a spiritual, whatever you want to call it, that isn't telling us that we need to do something. I grew up with a Gurdjieff work that talks about Kundalini buffer and false personality, and you have to do something. So this is just, I know, I can read that grin.
No, you can find people that'll tell you that diamond does turn over a rock and it doesn't, it won't crawl out.
It is just really remarkable.
You have to fix this, you have to fix that, you have to stop doing this, you have to start doing that. It doesn't matter what you do or don't do. It's what it is that is powerful. And what it is turns out to be absolutely transcendental divinity. It's divinity. for you bhaktis in the crowd. Careful. Okay. That's really, from my perspective and my discovery, this is the wonderful good news, is you don't have to change anything, you just have to see what it is. And it already is what it is, and you're already seeing what it is, so that is actually remarkably easy to do, even though it can paradoxically seem to be challenging. Even though you're already seeing it, it can be tricky letting yourself notice that you're seeing it. But that's the only really relevant, that's the only really fly in the ointment.
It's just so amazing. I just love the way you said, me with all my neurosis and blah, 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 blah. And the tree, there is a tree in my neighborhood that has grown up against a rock. It's just absolutely mind-blowing.
The logic of why it's okay is that, or could be put as being that what this is not dependent upon what it looks like. What this is not dependent upon its process. So it can look like all sorts of problems. It can look like humanity going to hell in a handbasket and dysfunctional governments and stupid individuals doing stupid things. It can look like all of that, but that doesn't taint or damage what this is one tiny bit. And if all that wasn't happening and everything was absolutely pristine and gorgeous and it was a golden age, it wouldn't improve what this is one tiny bit. This is what it is, and that's the powerful fact, that's the important fact. And here's the kicker, what you are is what it is. So even though you look like all the ways you may look, and you can make a list of, well, I'm this and I'm that and I'm the other, in actuality, what you are completely and totally is this that is not affected by what it looks like. Again, you can think, dreaming is a good example. You can dream any, you can have the most wonderful, exquisite, beautiful, luminous dream, and you can have a horrible, sordid nightmare or some really squalid, degenerate vision. And the dreamer isn't hurt by the ugliness, and the dreamer isn't improved by the beauty.
That's helps, yeah.
You know, I mean, that's a kind of it's almost a trite spiritual analogy, but actually it's a very good metaphor. And it's reality. Well, reality is what it is, and what its process of what it seems to be presenting as and going through, it's not improved by that or damaged by that. It's completely upstream from that causally. Let's say it's generating appearances, but appearances don't impact on it. Is a good way to put it. And all the stuff we get all bent out of shape about is just appearances, and we ignore what it is, which is unnecessary, because in actuality we are what it is, and we have access to direct and concrete and absolutely profound experience of that fact, of what it is and what we are. What's you're experiencing right now is absolute reality, and what's being experienced is absolute reality. And that fact is not just a theory, that's not just a philosophy, it's a concrete present fact, and it's actually a quite obvious fact in a fully engageable fact.
So you said that we are occurrences.
You are the occurrence.
So everything that's
This is the occurrence, this is you.
and everything happening in the world.
There's no everything, there's no world. It's just you. It's just this happening here.
I forget.
The only way you ever know about anything happening in the world is if some echo of it shows up here in your experience.
Like the radio.
Radio, internet,
Yeah.
newspapers. But the actuality of that is your experience of it. Experience is individual, experience is not global. People talk about something like the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War was, a million different things to the million different people who were in it. To some people it might have been an exquisite love fest, to other people it was a complete horror show. I mean, who knows what it is? It is what it is to you. I mean, what is this meeting? Is this meeting an absurd bollocks of gibberish, or is it a very profound discourse of, great meaningfulness? Well, you have to ask each person to get an answer to that, because there's no global answer. Reality only appears to the individual. I mean, this is physics. The quantum interactions that you experience as reality and the quantum interactions that I experience in reality are different quantum interactions. I see different photons than you do. So when you see that lamp and I see that lamp, that lamp is a theory. The actuality is the photons you're seeing that you're calling that lamp, which are entirely and utterly physically different than the photons I'm seeing. So if we call it that lamp, it's just a fiction. The actuality of my set of photons and your set of photons are completely separate, entirely different. For example, if there were photons.
This is crazy, but I feel the truth. It's just crazy. How we forget.
Well, being is truth. Actuality is truth. Presence is truth. And so truth is very easy. Look at what's present. I mean, that's the whole essence of noticing. Look at what's present and let it show you what it is.
I know, but what's blowing my mind are my beliefs about it that I don't even look at until you open it up. Great. Yeah.
Oh, we're bombarded by misinformation. I mean, unfortunately, there's all these apparent mechanisms of suggestion. The semantic sea of the system we're embedded in is basically a system of hypnotic suggestion. If not intentionally, then it's in fact, and it's all misinformation. So we're all continually being bombarded with a sea of semantic misinformation, which has an intrinsic hypnotic suggestible potency that we're all more or less wafted away on. So I mean, that's a difficult current to find your way around. Even the structure of language is completely pregnant with misimplication. There's nouns and verbs. In reality, there's no objects and there's no actions. But the very structure of language implies and suggests that there are things and there are actions. And so if you're using words, then naturally you're tending to categorize the universe, your reality, in terms of, well, there's things, there's chairs, there's people, there's lights, there's a roof, there's blah, 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 blah. And the light is shining, and the chair is sitting, and the air conditioner is humming, and the this and the that. But there's no air conditioner, there's no lights, and actually there's no humming, there's no sitting. What it actually is utterly beyond the implications of those, differentiable separations. Huh?
Those are interpretations.
Yeah.
Those words.
Yeah. Words imply a structure. The structure of language implies a structure of the world, and we naively assume that there's a correlation, that the world actually corresponds to the structure language has, which is a very, very dangerous supposition from the point of view of spirituality, because in actual fact, the structure of language is entirely and utterly in error in terms of the implications it has about the structure of the world, of reality. Actually, reality is a continuum. It's an instantaneous, spontaneous continuum with no things in it whatsoever, and no actions in it whatsoever. It is pure action, and there are no things. I mean, that's the truth of the way things are. But language doesn't. How do you say that in a language that's made of where every word is a thing? There's all these nouns, and there are actually no objects in the world. What do you know?
Sign language. That works.
Or just interpretive dance.
That would be fabulous. Wow.
But we have the fortunate fact that language isn't really language, so the problem doesn't really arise. See, when I'm talking, you may think I'm saying words, but I'm not actually saying words. I'm just making sounds. So it's actually an improvisational singing that's happening. It's free-forming, completely meaningless, except for the energy presence of the experiential textures that are there. So that's happening as well, even if your mind is pretending it's words.
So amazing, because when I go out to my day, I'm so enveloped in the belief system. And then I sit here and it's just, it's
Well, this is the challenge in all this. In spirituality, the real challenge, seeing reality is very easy. Letting go of unreality is what's hard. Seeing reality is very, very easy. It's that snapback, that knee-jerk snapback habitual to unreality that's the problem. But if you see reality again and again, reality is going to win. Period. Because reality has authority that vastly overpowers any claimed authority of its interpretive framework.
Yeah, it only took us a couple hours.
A lifetime in a couple of hours, not bad.
Are you 100% experiencing fullness of this actuality, or when you operate in the world, you get out of it?
No, always. Everyone is always.
No, it is.
We think we get out of it, but that's a pretense. You're never actually out of it. How can you get out of it?
Yeah.
I mean, we get distracted by our interpretations, and we can even get so distracted we think we're in it. But in actuality, that's a pretense. It's like acting a role. You know, you may be acting a role, but you never stop being yourself. So likewise, you know, we may be being distracted by these interpretations and these narratives, but real experience never stops. Or you would stop functioning, because most functioning is not interpretive. Like, you know how to walk, you know how to breathe, you know how to move. You know, these are not conceptual actualities. That's real, you know, that's inconceivable. You can't say how you do it, because it's not something that's amenable to analysis. And so we're always in reality all the time, even if we get powerfully distracted by our narratives, you know, our interpretive framework. But the distraction doesn't mean that we're actually losing reality. We're just pretending we are.
Do you think that's the fundamental grief, I think, that is deep in all humans, is this, somehow this sense of who they are and a longing for that, but...
Well, I don't know, I think that everyone knows who they are. But people get distracted from that and think that they are something else than they are, even at the same time as they know who they are. So it's a kind of insanity, the coexistence of the actuality, the genuine actuality, and these counterfeit partialities, and then and somehow forgetting the presence of the actuality, even while actuality is being experienced and even enjoyed. And I think it's very strange. I mean, it's no wonder humans are so crazy, because the human perspective is so scrambled and so incoherent.
They get distracted by who they think they're supposed to be. Is that
Whatever, who they think they are, even while they know that they're more than that, and yet they somehow don't let themselves know that they're more than that, and yet they're knowing that they're more than that. So it's a complete inconsistency. No wonder it drives people nuts. No wonder humans are crazy. Having to do crazy things all the time. I mean, to deny what you know is undeniable. That's got to drive you nuts, right?
Seems like there's such a strong pressure, peer pressure,
Yeah.
as you call it.
Sure.
Humanity, all
Oh,
the
yeah.
things that we've done for centuries built up, and there's sort of
Sure.
ingrained in that, life.
Yeah, sure. All this, consensus reality is supposed to be someone. You're supposed to be a human. You're supposed to be in the world. There's supposed to be a world.
It's kind of holds you.
But like you say, it's peer pressure. We're being bombarded continually with somatic information that's like that. And if you try to counter that in any way, you'll discover a lot of affront. You'll discover people get bent out of shape very rapidly as soon as you start saying, no, it's not like that. Unless you do it under the table in a quasi-socially approved guise like, oh, I'm spiritual, it's okay. Oh, you're spiritual, why didn't you say so? I.e. wacko. Yeah. You must be from California. That's Yes, I am, as a matter of fact. So it's allowed, right? Expected even.
Well, this distracted, is so interesting. The people that I work with, well, I could probably put myself in that same category.
Of course.
Um,
We're all in the same boat.
Here we are. Think that as they look within, they're gonna find things that are wrong with them. They're gonna find that they're really bad. It's just,
All that's easy when you, except when you get to bad is good. Good is good and bad is good. That's just another flavor of good.
I don't know.
Good has lots of flavors. All of them weird.
Peter, if the interpretive and the non-interpretive, or the linear and the non-linear, are existing simultaneously,
Yes.
and we're experiencing both,
Yes.
is it the awareness that we're in the interpretive mode and we see that we're not mesmerized by it, that keeps us in the attentive state, or it means we're still in that listening state?
I'm not sure I followed the second half of it.
So if you're mesmerized
Right.
by the interpretation,
Right.
then you're believing it in that moment.
Right.
But if you can step outside and see it
Right.
as you experience it, is that staying in the non-linear state while experiencing interpretive?
Yeah, you don't even need to stay in it. It's not important to stay in it. It's just important to see it. And typically what happens is when we do these kinds of experiments, we see it in little snippets and then we get lost back again in our normal interpretive mode. But that's not important because the seeing is very powerful, and over time it restructures our orientation. Because the way our minds seem to work is very strange, because there's a part of us that is always seeing the nonlinearity and knows it very intimately. And that part of us knows that and also knows the linear part. But the linear part is much more segregated. It knows only the linear part and it cannot see or acknowledge the nonlinear part. So there's two of you. There's one of you that knows all of you, and there's another of you that only knows a part of you. And unfortunately for most people in the norms of social functioning, we identify with the part of ourselves that's partializing. And so the part of ourselves that knows everything is kind of like, our shadow that's sort of following us around, but and even though it's actually doing everything, it's not being acknowledged. And so this is really about becoming sensitive to that portion of our experience. And from that perspective, we can know everything, because that part of us does know everything. And we already are that, even though strangely we don't seem to have very explicit aspect to that perspective. But that's not impossible. It's possible to have access to that perspective just by this kind of training of, just going there every once in a while and playing with it.
And even more mysterious perhaps is the vibrational field of us gathering together.
Sure.
And how that's
more
on
of it.
us.
Yeah, I mean, all of the way that the energy patterns and flavors interact is astounding, and it's just circles within circles within circles. I mean, it's a bewildering dance of profundity. But yeah, for sure. There's all of this. I mean, another aspect of this that I haven't really talked about explicitly today is that all of this that's occurring, this presence and this actuality, is not just an inert fact. It's a hyper-sentient, hyper-intelligent, hyper-functional. Intrinsically, it is that. So it's pure genius. It's pure lucidity. It's pure intelligence. So it has a direct and intimate and meaningful engagement with all of these levels of its own dance. And of course we experience this in communication and meaningfulness and all kinds of resonances that happen, in learning and all these various things. This is its potency exploring itself in the guise of all of this seeming event. Yeah.
Is it creating a more fertile environment when we come together with that intention, or is it just happens?
It just happens. What happens, happens. It's in itself is very nonlinear and not amenable to seeing what it's doing or how it's doing it. It might look like a train wreck, but that may be its version of an effective process. It's doing something that for it is very profound. You know? I mean, from our human perspective, we often think that, success is good and success looks like such and such, but, maybe from this other perspective, maybe disaster can be a kind of a successful effectiveness too. Who knows, right? Our human value system is very partial. Reality is very happy with destruction. Reality is very happy with genocide. Reality is very happy with extinction. So that may be its idea of really effective functioning. Whereas as humans, we look at it and say, oh no!
This way you perceive reality has to do with from which part of the brain, the left or the right side you function. That one part of the brain is parallel processing and the other is linear.
Quite possibly, and there may be resonances like that.
It's
but it's not like it comes from the brain necessarily, but there may be correlations from this with that. I mean, the brain comes from reality, just like everything comes from reality. So everything, the structure of everything, and the functional structurality of everything reflects the way reality works. So yeah, there's probably aspects of that.
It's just that neuroscientist who got a stroke and so was forced into the left brain, and all of a sudden, her reality was, what you're talking about.
Sure.
And
yeah, there can be aspects of it. It's about noon, so we'll break for lunch in a minute, but let's have another.
Well, I'd like to just take this a little further. Apparent disaster. I mean, there's a part of my mind that's already starting to get this a little bit, but apparent disaster could be, in truth, beneficial.
Of course.
I mean, it flies in the face of everything everybody believes.
But not really, not if you're honest. If you look at it, sometimes when things fall apart, that can be a very productive aspect of growth and evolution. We're very sort of, it's easy as a human being to be very biased in terms of the value system, what's good and what's balanced, what's good and what's bad, what's successful, what's unsuccessful. But in actuality, in the complexity of things, something that's unsuccessful or failing or disintegrating can actually be a part of some process that's very constructive. I mean, death, and the circle of life, death is birth. Life is an outgrowth of the cessation of other life, for example. So, I mean, we say, no, death is terrible, it's a big failure. No, maybe that's a good news. From the point of view of life, it's great, yeah. Bring it on, more fertilizer. So why don't we take a break for lunch? Why don't we have like say an hour and a half-ish, just a relaxed, lazy time for lunch, and we'll meet back here and we'll reconvene. It's about noon now, maybe around 1:30-ish, if that's good for you. I believe there's some restaurants in the area. If you don't know, you can ask someone that looks like they mind.
Yeah,
follow someone that looks like
if you go down,
mind.
if you go off the 15th and then go south to about 125th, and you go over to Lake City where there's some restaurants over there. Plus there's.
Yeah, that sounds wrong.
Huh? That sounds wrong? We'll go out to 15th, right?
Go south?
Go south on 15th and then go east on 125th. Yeah. East on 125th. That will take you over to Lake City Way, and there's several restaurants there. But there's also a Chinese restaurant about 2-3 blocks from here.
On 15th.
On 15th. On 15th.
You're pointing.
Am I pointing the wrong way? That's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, it's that way.
Somewhere, it's out there.
That's right. About north on 15th is the Back Row Chinese restaurant.
Yeah.
And then, also, before you get there on the left, is a Subway and a Starbucks.
Right.
And then instead of doing that, if you just went east on 145th and make a left on Lake City Way.
I know, but I changed.